Welcome to the Lyfe Podcast.
Welcome to the Lyfe Podcast. Hello, this is your host, CJ Alton. And today we are going to be talking about something very special. We're going to be talking about the Black perspective in South Africa. And as you can see, we have an amazing guest today. I've worked with her in the past. She does great work in South Africa. I hope you guys follow her after you see this episode and see all the great things that she is doing. So she'll be talking about her perspective in South Africa with racism, oppression, and history within the education system. So with that said, my guest today, Nadine. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Alton. How are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. Now that I have this project going on, the Black perspective, I had to get the perspective of South Africa because, as we talked about before, we do live in arguably two of the most racist countries in the world. So it's really important for not just America, but for the rest of the world to see, the perspective of Black history and Black culture in South Africa and what that looks like today and what your school experience has been throughout your life. So again, I'm just thanking you for being here.
Thank you for extending the invite. I'm really privileged and honored to be part of this big project and just playing a small role in it, man. So thank you.
You're definitely playing a big role,
But let me put a disclaimer. I am not the ambassador for South Africa. Okay. I am not the spokesperson for South Africa. I am just merely sharing my experiences and my perspective. Okay, don't come at me. I am not the ambassador for the whole of South Africa. Okay, now that is out the way.
Is certainly not the ambassador, but she is a person that lives in South Africa and has a lot more experience than me in that country. So no, none of my guests have been ambassadors, but nonetheless,
Okay.
your experience will be very crucial. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. Where were you born in South Africa? What was the city?
I was born in the Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth, where the ocean is amazing. P is a vibe. P is chilled. We're known as the friendly city, all smiles, all hugs, love, just love.
Okay, so it was a beach city. You live next to the water.
Yes, Port Elizabeth. Now, currently where I'm staying in, I'm living in Johannesburg. There's no ocean. There's no sea breeze. It's inland. But I was born in Port Elizabeth, known now as Makanda.
Oh,
no,
wow.
not Makanda. Makanda's Utnek. It's known as Tebeja. It's just renamed.
Okay. Okay. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where you essentially grew up? Was the Eastern Cape, or did you grow up somewhere else? Like,
I actually grew up, in various places because of my dad's type of work. So Mossel Bay, Grootbrak, but my family home is Port Elizabeth. Yeah. So I
okay.
did primary school in Mossel Bay, which is in the Western Cape, and I did high school in the Eastern Cape.
Okay. And so if you don't mind me asking, what is like your family background, like your ethnicity?
Family background, I'm colored. I know in America you guys refer to colored as black. In South Africa, we have colored as in like the white race mixes with the black race, and then you get us. So we get the in-between, hence the coffee type of caramel type of milk imitation. In-between, man. Okay. So us in-betweens are classed as colored people. Some people would debate that no, it's the Khoisan and whatever. I'm pretty fine. I'm content in being colored. But there is a history of German in my blood from my grandparents. And then we colored. My dad's colored, my mom's colored, my family's colored. Colored by color, but not my culture. Let me say that.
That's a great emphasis. That's a great emphasis. So with that, right, you have this mix, you have this background, and obviously you're still relatively young. Didn't live in the pivotal time of racism in South Africa, but nonetheless, right, racism still exists. And so I'm really curious to know, from your lens, right, what has been the experience of racism with your family growing up? Was there something, specifically that you saw or heard? I mean, that your family saw? What was racism for you growing up in South Africa? This episode is sponsored by the Lyfe Network, where we focus on melanin history, culture, and wellness. Please support our products that represent history, culture, and wellness. We have king and queen shirts that represent our history and the greatness that we have in our culture for thousands of years. We also have confident shirts that give a message of positivity and bring value to our self-worth. We also have Confianza shirts to represent the Hispanic and Latin community to bring together Black and Brown unity. You can find our products on 2 different platforms. 1, our website, and 2, Etsy.com. Our website, Lyfe, Lyfe -network.com. You can also check out Etsy and type in the Lyfe Network. If you have any questions, we do have a number available on our website, so please feel free to contact us today with any questions. So support us today and enjoy the rest of the episode.
So in theory, let me just explain, like, racism was implemented to maintain a system that actually got legalized with the objective to enhance racial segregation, in which racial groups were deprived of political and civil rights. So although it didn't affect me personally, I know that it affected my granddad and my mom and my grandmom, For example, in our family, my granddad had vacant land, and because of the new bill that was implemented about 2 years ago in South Africa, we as a family got the opportunity to get land repatriation for my grandfather. So the value of the land that was stolen from him got given back to us years later.
Great.
So that personal domino effect actually made me realize that the systemic racism actually goes that deep.
Mhm.
It's not surface level, it affects generations,
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, just throughout your life, and I know you have the apartheid movement and things of that nature. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what that is specifically, apartheid. But I would say in the 21st century, right? You're living your life and you're growing up and you're experiencing things. How has the dynamic of racism changed, again, just through your lens, from the 20th century and maybe the 1990s, whatever, to what you've seen in the last 5 or 10 years? I mean, has it improved? Is it still kind of, stagnant? What is just your perspective of that?
So I want to bring in that there is a common thread between apartheid, the slave trade, and colonization.
Mhm.
Like, they're not separate.
Mm.
There are certain things that, whoa, that looks familiar, but it takes in a form when it comes to execution very differently. But there's so many commonalities between the slave trade, colonization, and apartheid. For example, even if you bring in the whole classism, economics of scale, some people, we'll say, were born into poverty. That's just a layman's term. But I think the middle class, the lower class, the upper class is always a classism in South Africa that affects decision making, and also affects either your limitation of access, or your bountiful opportunity to access. I can give you a simple example. When I was in grade 12, I had to look for bursaries. So grade 12 is the last year of high school in South Africa. And I was out there trying to get like bursaries, get money for varsity. And one of my closest friends, she was a white girl, and her name was Inga Nietling, right? And I was like, why aren't you applying for varsity, And she's like, no, because of my surname. Her surname was Nietling. We'll automatically get a bursary. So it was embedded in her lineage, by her surname, that they have access to tertiary education. And here I was just trying to get funds to start, and that was like, whoa, actually living in different worlds where there's different opportunities, different access, and different privileges. Look, and I'm not coming to people that have access to privileges because they're born into that, they can't help it. But there's a form of complacent poverty, born poverty, like you're born into poverty, or you accumulate poverty in South Africa.
So you did bring up school, and that's where I wanted to transition. It's kind of a two-part question where, first I did want to ask, how is the school system in South Africa structured? So like, for example, in America, we have elementary, we have middle school, and then we have high school, right? And then I wanted to ask about maybe the racism that you've experienced throughout your school experience. So it's a two-part question really, is how is South Africa's school system structured? And then did you, experience anything in your school experience?
So the structure of the school, well, we have private schools, and then we have government schools, right? A Model C schools, Model A schools. So it's categorized in models. And it's broken down into grade R, which is elementary, like you would call it. And then primary school, that's grade 1 to grade 7. And then we have high school, grade 8 to 12. And then we have varsity, tertiary. Yeah.
Okay.
And then private, it's more like people have access to horse riding and gym. That's the private school opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side is like they're just trying to get good school shoes and textbooks. So it's a whole different world. You get someone that has the privilege of having the lights on to study versus someone that has to study with a candle at night, avoiding the shack that they live in to burn out because they need the paraffin to have light to see what they're doing. Where someone has Wi-Fi, can YouTube, have music in the background, maybe go for a drive, and maybe just have breakfast in the morning. Like it's whole different worlds. You know what I mean? Within the schooling system. I mean, some school kids, they are forced to be breadwinners in the household because dad's not around. Mom has to go work in the city. So you're having grade 8s looking after their younger brothers, hustling between working, cooking.
Right. And so, yeah, so that is basically what you're speaking of, right? With these lack of resources and technology. You can't speak for the whole country, but just through, again, your lens, the lack of resources, was that more towards colored folks in South Africa? Or
Yeah,
okay, I mean, you can confidently say like it was mostly,
completely.
yeah.
Like, let me explain to you. In South Africa, there's something called the BEE, right, system that the government implemented in South Africa. So BEE actually stands for the Black Economic Empowerment. So the objective of the Black Economic Empowerment, it's a policy of South Africa that aims to facilitate broader participation in the economy for Black people, right? That's why it was brought into government, to make the playing field a bit easier. In theory, it sounds amazing.
Sure.
But in execution, I can tell you there's a lot of corruption, because we do the tender process and this one knows this one, I'll get you in here if you give me a percentage. So in theory, it sounds amazing. They've also implemented something called NSFAS for university. It's for students that meet a certain criteria that can't afford varsity fees, where the government would pay on behalf of them as a subsidy, as well as providing food and tertiary education, as well as maybe hostel, living on the premises. So for our education system, you get the illiterate living in an AI world, still existing in one ecosystem where we have technology improving, we modernizing, but then 80% of the Black and colored, mostly Indian as well, they can't even read. So then we just like get in between the lines, like what is progression actually? If some classes are excluded, then are we actually progressing, or are we segmenting progression based on preference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really forced to live in the same economy, even though we're given these disadvantages. So that's where life becomes a struggle.
Yeah.
I got you. So, to kind of bring you back into memory lane, what was your favorite subject in school?
Biology. Only because I wanted to know about my skin type,
Ah,
my DNA. Why is my
mhm,
hair colored? It's not even about like the serious jargon about biology. I just wanted
right.
to understand, like, why do plants breathe? What's that process called? Oh no, it's photosynthesis. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah. How interesting.
So yeah, those are my two favorite subjects: business economics and biology. Yeah.
How interesting. Okay. And what was your least favorite?
Least favorite life orientation, bro. Like I could never life orientation. I don't know if you guys do it, but life orientation is basically like the teachers guiding us through life. And I could never understand that. I was like, how are you going through the whole school syllabus,
Yeah.
having the opportunity to take any other job in the world, and you decide to come back to school? You want to teach me about life and orientation? Nah, bruh. Get out of here. So,
How
like,
see.
you know, like your life has been a full circle. You did school, you came back to school, and all you know is school. Nah, I hated life orientation.
What about history? Was history something that you enjoyed?
The syllabus that we use here, it's more focused on Hitler, the Jews, and apartheid. You know what I
Mm,
mean? So it was very, it felt, now when I look back, not being biased, it just feels like it had a lot of propaganda because it didn't touch on things like the Rwandan genocide. You know, it didn't touch on things like the guerrilla war, you know, in Congo. They didn't speak about uh, Kenya when it was declared independent from Britain.
mm.
So that's still history, but I think the history that we were taught was just propaganda and history. You got to know about Hitler. You got to know about the apartheid. You got to know that the whites were bigger than the blacks, colors, and Indians. That's what it is. Where it stems from is from the Jews and the Germans. They were killed for it, and that's history, which is not. History is way broader
Right.
than what we were taught, because I feel that diaspora within Kenya, within Zimbabwe, within Rwanda, within Congo still affects us because it still has the African trading in between where South Africa is affected. There's a domino effect. So I think it's an injustice for us not to know about our sister continents, what they've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed really the next question I was going to ask was, it sounds like your history was very generic, which is basically what it is here in America.
Mhm.
From the K through 12 system where, in terms of Black people, and African Americans, and even people around the world, it's just that, right? They talk about slavery, they talk about the slave trade, they talk about civil rights. Yeah. And it kind of just stays there. They don't talk about the greatness of the pyramids. They don't talk about the greatness of, the accomplishments of people like kings like Mansa Musa and so forth, right? They don't talk about all the inventions that, our people have created. So I think there is a propaganda to it, and that's because, in my opinion, the people that are in control, what we call the school districts. But before I move on to talking about more history, I'm going to ask you something off script 'cause I don't want to forget. We talked a little bit about bricks, and I have a colleague where we talk about bricks quite often. What is your perception of this thing that they're calling bricks, which is basically a system of countries that want to develop a new currency? Um, you can't speak for the country, but just in your perspective, what do you believe about bricks? And is that helpful? Is it hurtful? Just talk about that a little bit.
It has been a very aggressive, direct. You guys thought you guys are owning every currency in South Africa and the value. And now, surprise, we're back at it. So for me to see it unfold, whether which country it is or which city it is, Brazil, these guys, India coming in. I'm happy to see that personal biases has been removed and a form of, how can I say, compatibility, openness to a new form of trade exchange within economies of scale. And I'm happy that they could put their differences aside to say, guys, there's one objective. This hasn't worked. Let's try this.
Mm.
So how that's executed, they might just map that out. But it's just beautiful to see it in the context of America thought you guys like nothing can beat us, nothing can come towards us, whatever. And then you get these African countries to say, no, actually, we do want a seat at the table to make decisions. We don't have to prove it to you. And we are not an afterthought anymore. We want to curate some form of thought at these boardrooms, at these decision-making strong moments in society that helps the narrative of our countries for the betterment of our empowering upliftment of skill and not being dependent on America's approval.
Going back into the school system, and this is an interesting question. Did you learn about African American history growing up in school? Was that part of the curriculum at all?
I think it was surface level informative. So plantation, cotton, slave trade, singing, how music played a role, and chanting, which gave a sense of freedom and unity. But I think it's not far off because we have this, the word that we use in South Africa called Ubuntu, meaning oneness, right? So your history is like a oneness, like when you're singing together on the plantation, getting cotton, and you're singing together, that's like chanting, singing, that's a sense of oneness. So we could resonate in that terms. But as for knowing the intricate details, like we knew about Martin Luther King, those type of things. But it was plainly just information. There was no diving in, there was no questioning, there was no breaking down of why this happened. What's the domino effect? Which goes back to your point, it might just have been curated,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
likewise. I think in America, in terms of South African history, it was, you know, basically really just apartheid and Nelson Mandela, and it didn't really go too much further than that. So it's
Right?
very basic. But going back into the continent of Africa, did you learn the teachers and the curriculum, did it go in depth about, specifically like ancient Egyptians and some of the kings and queens that we had in our ancestors' history? Did it go in depth with that?
To answer your question, we did in different forms, but
Yeah.
not in our text, in our home. We didn't have homework on it.
Okay. All right. And then I'm gonna ask this last question very diligently. Okay. Because I know we had discussed it, right? You're like, no, we don't need you. But let me ask it like this, right? How can African Americans and South Africans coexist, right, to help each other take their valuable resources, rather if that's currency, if that's culture, if that's language, if that's history, however that might be. How do you believe that we can help each other? What can we as African Americans provide to South Africans and vice versa, to where we can help coexist and build each other up as an African diaspora?
Because I'm some form like passionate about politics, right? In politics, we don't go by Republicans or Democrats. We have so many political parties, which is, yes, it's amazing how we express ourselves in the diversity, but it's also a bit confusing. We could learn from you guys to have black and white, make your choice, right or wrong, where we don't have 12 parties, and there's a whole lot of confusion, and we are obligated to segment pros and cons as to why we're picking a party. we can learn from you guys for doing that because it's plain, it's insight, and making insightful decisions. So from a political point of view, we could learn from you guys
Mm,
that there is advantage in only having two options. But that's just my biased opinion.
mhm,
Also, I think our side, because we have an amazing banking financial system,
mhm,
like our taxes included, we don't have to check, like write checks and go to the bank and do that whole system. That's just terrible. You guys can learn from us. Okay. Our purchases include the tax money in there. We can do EFT e-wallets from your phone.
mhm.
Okay. You don't have to check stuff in an envelope and lick the envelope. Like, do better, with all due respect. Um, and then I think collaboration can be in the standard of excellence. I think there's a lot we can learn in South Africa with your standard of excellence of implementation, whether it is from the private sector, public sector, SME sector. Um, and we also have a standard of excellence that's global, but I think there's a lot of improvement that's needed so we can be in the same playing field and actually be recognized as prestigious.
I mean, is there anything just personally that you would like to share to prompt more unity amongst African diaspora, not just in America, not just in South Africa, but just around the world? Is there anything, special you would like to share about unity?
We've lost the fact that we're expecting unity from our teachers to teach our kids, where if they taught it in the household in the form of unity, it will make their work better in the classroom. So I think we just got to remember that unity starts at home, value systems starts at home, implementation of basic decision making and navigating through life starts at home. So that's all unified within the human's decision making process navigating this world. So I think once we get the house right with what unity is, um, I think everything might just flow from there. So yeah, unity starts at the house, it starts in the household.
I appreciate you so much coming on here talking about your perspective in your country of South Africa.
Thank you for creating a safe space.
Of course. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Keep well, Alton. Goodbye.
Bye.